We all know the seriousness of the climate situation.
Fire!
How dare you? And surely every country is mobilizing all their forces in preparation for what is humanity's greatest threat, right? Or are they? Or are there some countries that have a secret agenda in mind? But one thing that is very clear is that climate change is real and has very real consequences for all nations on Earth. But there are definitely a few countries that might see a hypothetical benefit in the warming of our planet. Perhaps in their case, the benefits might outweigh the negatives. Small notch. Who are these countries? What are these countries? And why do they have such benefits? And what does it mean for the future? We'll find out just that. The first country is New Zealand, the beautiful land of Middle Earth, Kiwis, place named straight from hell, and the country that always finds itself mysteriously erased from all world maps. But what benefits could New Zealand find in climate change? Well, for starters, agriculture is something that's slated to improve in New Zealand under current climate models. The growing season in many Kiwi countryside is actually quite short, especially in the southern colder parts. Warming temperatures could lengthen growing seasons and make agriculture as a whole more productive. Also, New Zealand naturally lies in a cooler latitude of the Earth, meaning that it's not as predisposed to drought or bushfires as, say, nearby drier Australia. It also has a high renewable rate for electricity, and can act as an effective spot for refugees and migrants from other countries. Despite this, I would definitely say New Zealand would be at least a little bit hesitant about climate change. If I were to put it on a scale of climate change desiredness, I would put New Zealand right in the middle. Although I can definitely see New Zealand having an improvement in world standing, New Zealand could definitely see an unmanageable influx of climate migrants from nearby countries, and being a small nation that is pretty much dependent on other countries to maintain its standard of living, infrastructure and society could definitely collapse very quickly under such circumstances. Kiwis don't want climate change, right? Or do they? Another set of countries that definitely won't be as hesitant as Kiwis when it comes to embracing climate change will definitely be the Nordic countries, namely Sweden, Finland, and Norway. These three countries are poised to benefit immensely from climate change. Throughout their histories, the Nordic countries have kind of existed in their own northern domain. Their biggest fear wasn't Rome, wasn't the Ottomans, wasn't Napoleon. It was just the bitter, bitter cold. But hey, we've got family and we got our work ethic, said every Swede, Norwegian, and Finnish person ever. As a result, their societies developed an emphasis on community and focusing inwards to lead to success, rather than look outwards as much of squabbling Europe did at the time, except maybe on a few occasions. And boy, are they successful. The Nordic countries consistently rank as being the happiest and the most economically successful. And yet, every Nordic person basking in the pleasant summer temperatures always have nightmares for that. The bitter cold, the white powder that stays on the streets, the darkness that never ceases to light for 6 months at a time. That's the greatest fear of every Nordic person. But beyond ambient desires, warmer temperatures have other benefits for these countries. Much of the land in the Nordic countries are just not arable or viable for agriculture because of just the ridiculously short growing seasons. Warmer temperatures will definitely lead to longer growing seasons and also open up a lot more land in the north for agricultural production. And also, these countries are some of the most sustainable ones on Earth. They have high rates of renewable energy usage and also have high rates of EV adoption. Climate change will also allow these countries to produce more renewable energy, as warmer temperatures lead to the faster melting of glaciers and snowpack, leading to more hydroelectric power potential, at least in the short run. Fish. As the waters get warmer, certain prized fish populations will naturally migrate northwards in search of more suitable waters, finally giving them more access to the stock from those pesky Brits. And the absolute crown jewel, a northern sea route as all that ice begins to melt. No need to go south and deal with all those other countries when you can go north and head straight to those juicy Asian markets. Money galore. We can have a subscription fee and charge all these ships that use our route because it's faster. But that's only for Norway though. Next up. Okay, let me just say that anthem is way better than the US's. I mean, it's just way easier to sing. No surprise, Canadians want climate change. Fun fact, did you know that 100% of Canadians live right on the US border? Because the rest of their country is a frozen wasteland ruled by the warring chiefdoms of polar bears and Canadian geese. Canada is one of those countries that has a lot of land, a lot of water, a lot of natural resources, yet it can barely use any of that just because of how uninhabitable a lot of its land is. But with increasingly warming temperatures, a large portion of the North American landmass can actually be opened up to be settled and farmed. And Canada especially stands to benefit because Canada owns all of that land. While the US down below basically gets baked to death with the warming projections we have, Canadian climate will be practically perfect. Also, the North Pole has been a pretty bad pain in the butt for Canadians. I mean, it's frozen, no one wants to live there, and it's full of dangerous wildlife. But no longer. Soon the Arctic will have ice-free winters, and Canadians control a massive portion of the Arctic coastline, meaning cha-ching, cha-ching. And they will soon have control of the fabled Northwest Passage. So many explorer has perished in search of it. If they had just waited a few hundred years, they could have finally seen it under climate change. Also, the melting ice means that Canadians can get more oil and natural gas. Woohoo! Just the thing we need, am I right? Nothing like some last-minute exploitive capitalism. But also, every Canadian's greatest dream will come true. They can finally be better than the United States. There are two ways the climate situation kind of plays out in my mind. The first way is the US kind of just takes over the Canadian government and just moves a few latitude points north. Or Canadians will maintain their control and have absolute power over the Americans. You know, they can kind of decide who they want to let in and don't want to let in. Either way, Canadians will be living it under climate change. I mean, while the rest of the world burns, Canadians can just keep moving north and north until they find better land. Although I will say they will definitely be at least a little bit hesitant. Because, surprise, surprise, Canadians rely immensely on the United States, and a collapse of the US economy definitely wouldn't go too well for Canadians. Also, another simple math equation: how is their population, which is a tenth of the US population, going to ever effectively defend their borders to stop the hordes of Americans trying to rush into their country? Maybe climate change is still bad, says Justin Trudeau. Or maybe not. Did you also know that Canada has 20% of the world's total freshwater supply? As more and more countries reel from devastating drought caused by climate change, it is believed that water will become so expensive that Canadians will actually be able to make a profit off of it by exporting water, like as in like transporting water on a container ship and taking it to these countries. Yeah, we're definitely screwed. Yep, so more power to the Canadians, I guess. We should all start praying to our Canadian overlords. But unlike Canada, who might pretend like they don't want climate change, this country sees climate change as its destiny to greatness. Every Russian leader has had those sleepless nights where they ask themselves, why don't we have a warm water port? What? Your harbors freeze over winter, and the ones that don't freeze we can easily blockade, said every American ever. Russia, a country with dramatic history, politics, and military power, has always been held back by one thing. It's just too damn cold. It's the largest country in the world, no doubt, but a lot of that land would cryogenically freeze you if you even thought about taking a step down into it. I mean, it is just ridiculously cold. Growing seasons are short, all the sea routes are blocked up by ice, and they have Siberia. Why couldn't our country be warmer, prayed every Russian leader ever. But fear no more, because climate change is going to make all your greatest wishes come true, Russia.
That's a lovely accent you have.
Russia's already a massive power in the agricultural market. I mean, they control a ridiculous portion of the world's grain supply, and that was very evident in the recent Russian-Ukraine conflict. A lot of countries have faced extremely high grain prices because both of these countries have withheld their grain supply. And especially as many populations across the world face an increased risk of starvation because of climate-induced weather events that are destroying their crops. What is more powerful than controlling literally food when citizens of certain countries can or cannot eat? I mean, that just sounds like an absolute amount of power that Russia would probably want. It already dominates the world's energy market due to its massive supply of oil and natural gas. And now imagine the Russian country becoming increasingly warmer. The vast Siberian lands previously uninhabitable becoming open for agriculture and human settlement. And this is something that's actually already happening. With a longer growing period with increasingly warm temperatures, Russia can produce more and more grain. And as other countries struggle to produce their own grain because of climate-induced weather events, Russia can naturally close that gap. And also, as with Canada, Russia has the longest coastline on the Arctic, and if all that ice begins to melt and we see ice-free Arctic summers, Russia can now technically have a warm water port in the north that can't be effectively blocked by any other country's naval power. Cha-ching with all that commerce flowing through that passageway, which they could probably instate a toll on as well. But also, the Russian Navy is not restricted as it was in the past. It can be unleashed at full force because now it doesn't need to worry about being blockaded in its strategic locations as it is now. Unlike Canada, a country that might be hesitant to leverage its benefits under a new climate reality because of its close connections to the United States, for example, Russia simply doesn't have an incentive to do so. Russia, on the other hand, has always been that sort of independent superpower that's trying to best the US at every turn. With one of the world's strongest militaries, unlike Canada, I can definitely see Russia effectively policing its own border, and can determine who it lets in and doesn't let in. This gives Russia almost limitless political power, especially if the world actually devolves to the state that current climate projections predict. Also, did you know that Russia controls a fifth of the world's water supply? Again, the same deal with Canada, right? It could easily export its water supply and have a massive economic benefit, but also a lot of political power in the countries it is shipping water to. I mean, one day Russia could just threaten that they won't send water, and that country will be forced to sign whatever agreement that Russia throws at it just to keep that water supply coming. I mean, water is important after all. It's also important to understand the mindset of Russia, in my opinion. This is like, I mean, Russia's like, it's for Russia, this is like thinking that you got like the worst build in the meta, and then like all of a sudden like this character just gets like buffed up, and now it's like the meta. That's basically the situation that Russia might find itself in the future. Russia perceives itself as this once glorious superpower that's been reduced to a shadow of what it once was, essentially a punching bag for the Western countries. It wants respect, it wants people to fear its power, and climate change promises to give all of that in this sort of absolute fashion, so it can watch the West, its absolute sworn enemy, crumble as it sips vodka at the window. For that reason, I personally believe that Russia is a country that probably wants climate change to happen the most. I mean, it gives them the most power that they could ever think of over all these countries, and it could definitely find itself in sort of like a superpower situation as other countries struggle to keep up with the negatives of the new climate reality. Climate change is obviously a bad thing. Millions of people will be displaced. The biodiversity of the entire world will be pretty much wrecked. And every country will definitely face a negative impact, regardless of sort of like some of the benefits that they might get. And that's why this topic is so interesting to me. As the effects of climate change become more and more evident each day, and as more and more people are becoming affected by it, do some people groups see an inherent benefit to their better position that they can then use to have more control and power over other people groups that haven't fared as well as them? It's an interesting thing to speculate, so I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you think in the comments. Do you think some countries will truly benefit and become more powerful than they are? Or do you think the opposite will happen? Until then, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.